Welcome to Hogvillenet YouTube Live. We're going to have to do handheld today. Normally, when I set this, I'm able to go horizontal with my phone and put it on the tripod, but that's not working. So you can see me in a psychedelic manner, horizontally, or you can see me like this. We're going vert here, but it's going to be handheld, and we're going to try to keep it as brief as possible. We got big news today, and really a lot of news lately. We haven't come in to talk about it. But now that there's been some accumulation in terms of commits out of the portal, some movement with Arkansas players, mostly going in the draft, there's been a lot of activity. And then we know there's been visitors. There's more of that to come. But we're going to hit a couple of things that happened today first. Khalif Battle, Temple guard, 6'5", grad transfer, 6'5" guard. This guy's a scorer shooter. When you look at his last two seasons, as a junior, he was injured and only played 7 games. But when you cobble together those games plus what he did this past season, this guy was not only a volume three-point shooter, but efficient. When you combine the numbers, roughly 3 makes per game from distance, right around 37%. So that's a really good percentage for the volume. But he became Arkansas's third portal commitment here on Wednesday today, as the Razorbacks, now have really answered some of the things in the backcourt. When you start looking at departures of Nick Smith Jr., the first to declare for the draft off this roster. Devo Davis was next. He's left the door open for return. Ricky Council after that. And then today, Anthony Black, he did his live on ESPN. I thought that was a huge marketing piece. Great collateral material for the Razorbacks basketball program to have a star player not only announce that he's going into the draft, he's a projected lottery pick on national television during NBA Today this afternoon, but he really praised the coaching staff, Eric Melsman, the assistants, and you could tell that Anthony Black was pleased with his time at Arkansas, said he couldn't ask for anything more. So that's a huge nugget for recruiting and for branding and for promoting your program. But that's a lot of players, especially out of the backcourt. All those names I mentioned, Smith Jr., Devo Davis, Council, the fourth, AB, those are your backcourt players. Those were your heavy minutes, heavy production guys. All of those guys averaged double figures in scoring and, did other things, and we know that, whether it was rebounding, assisting, steals. It's a lot of production. And so when we talk about a guy like Battle coming on board today, helps answer some of that. Previously, it was Tremont Mark, the junior transfer from Houston. Here's a guy that's got a winning pedigree similar to Devo's resume, even a little better when you look at in his previous 3 seasons, Final Four as a freshman. He played sparingly as a sophomore because of injury and a shoulder injury that required surgery, but that team went to the Elite Eight. And then this past season, he started every game on a team that was a number 1 seed, ranked number 1 much of the year, in the number 1 seed in the NCAA tournament, lost in the Sweet 16 to Miami, a Final Four team. But still, here's a player with a lot of NCAA tournament pedigree, 6'5", a wing that's, CBS Sports, by the way, ranks him the number 5 overall prospect in this portal. Battle, who I mentioned earlier, is ranked 20th by that same measure. So it's, these are 2 excellent 6'5" perimeter players that help answer some of these guys that have moved on. It seems like forever ago, but it was Tuesday of last week. So just short of 10 days ago, Keon Minifield, a 6'1" guard out of Washington, a freshman guard, was the first commitment out of the portal for the Razorbacks. Another backcourt guy. When you look at who they're bringing in the high school signing class from the early period, Layden Blocker, 6'2", 6'3" guard at a Sunrise Christian Academy. Arkansas's got 4 backcourt pieces that help respond to when you look at what's leaving and what's entered. Now, Devo Davis has left the door cracked for a return. The way I see it right now, I think it's more likely he stays in, but that could change. That calculation could certainly change, and he could come back as long as he keeps his eligibility maintained by, doing what's required as far as how, who his representation is and how he goes about testing the waters and getting feedback. But Arkansas has definitely started to load up in that backcourt. There was a potential for another commitment today. That didn't happen. And the way things are looking now in that sense, I'm not going to go into names. It might have sailed on that one. Things change, can be very fluid in recruiting, can change quickly. They certainly change quickly on that one. from what we thought would be a commitment to not. So I guess it could swing back the other way. As of now, it looks like maybe the ship has sailed there. We've talked about the fact that these players, the committed players, have mostly visited to this point. Um, the exception being really right now, uh, not talking to this point about upcoming visits. There's some stuff that I won't go into, but there's more to come, and I believe Arkansas will get at least one more player out of the portal, but I think it could be as many as three more. There may be a sweet spot in between there, but I think Arkansas is also looking to continue to address Frontline. We've talked about some of the player moves both in and out. What we didn't talk about so far is Mikel Mitchell, the fact that he recently announced he was entering the portal. Obviously, one of the interesting things is his twin brother, did not. Now, those guys have played together forever, always and forever to this point. Their moves through college from Maryland to Rhode Island to Arkansas. And so this would be a first if Mekhi Mitchell doesn't go into the portal or go wherever his brother does. But at some point in their basketball journeys, they're probably going to be separated from the hip. And so this might be that time. We'll keep an eye on that. The other thing is we're still waiting to hear from Jordan Walsh. Here's a guy that I think will enter the portal at some point, at least test the waters. But we'll see. We'll see what the decision there is and what announcement comes out and when. We've seen recently guys like Jalen Graham, the senior forward, who has another year of eligibility as a super senior, announce he was returning to Arkansas shortly thereafter. Guys like Joseph Pinion, Darian Ford, and Barry Dunning Jr. did similar things on social media. And so, we'll see how, again, how this roster shapes up through the portal. Having said everything I just did, what it really tells you is Arkansas right now is not, when you look at the numbers, the way it looks to us publicly right now, Arkansas came into today with one scholarship available. When you count Devo Davis as a guy who's in the draft right now, technically wouldn't be using a scholarship unless he comes back. But you recruit when a guy goes in the draft. You recruit as though you have to replace that player. So Arkansas entered the day with a spot to give. They got a commitment from Khalif Battle to fill that spot, and a few minutes later, AB announced he was going in the draft to create another roster spot. And so that's why we keep an eye on these things. So, for those that don't want to count, aren't ready to count Devo Davis against the number yet because he could come back, that's one way to do it. I've just explained how I look at it. And certainly if you fill up based on guys being in the draft, if later they decide to come back and they've given themselves that opportunity, then you do have a roster numbers crunch, and you've got to address that at that time. So we'll see how it all, again, shakes out going forward. The other thing we haven't talked about is Arkansas looking at more frontline pieces, with Trevor Brazile being the first guy to actually say, amid all these other players going into the NBA draft when those things started coming out, Brazile was the first one to say he was returning. And that's a 5-star recruiting win because he's a guy that could have, maybe tested the draft waters, listened to overtures. Things can always change, but for him to, I think it helped the portal recruiting. I think it helped with the continuity and stability of the roster. Musman chose last year to replace 11 of the 13 scholarship players. I don't think Arkansas is on close to a path like that. I think you may see, counting the two high school signees, early Bayfall and Layden Blocker, I think you might see up to 5 or 6 portal guys. Arkansas's got 3 committed now, so that could be as many as 3 more. But I think some of that hinges on what's available in terms of frontline options that Arkansas improves the roster for next season. And so I think there's going to be some slack in there, some wiggle room to either move forward with someone out of the portal or continue on your retention plan. But I think at the end of the day, we won't see more than 8 newcomers and probably maybe less than that. And that's more in line with what Musman had done in his previous 3 rosters when you looked at the recruiting cycles prior to last season, when that group, again, was 11 out of 13 were newcomers, a heavy mix of freshmen 6 and transfer portal guys, that was 5. You look at what the program has done to elevate guys like Anthony Black, who, again, is a projected first-round lottery pick, Ricky Council, who's got some late first round, early second round, mid second round projections. Nick Smith Jr., who I thought We've seen him move a little bit down, but he's still mostly in a lot of these projected in the lottery. ESPN Draft Express came out. The most recent release had AB going at number 8, Nick Smith Jr. going at number 12. So those are both lottery picks. They had Council projected at 42, so that's mid second round, and then Jordan Walsh was projected at 52, and so you may see more and more mock drafts come out with Jordan Walsh in the 2-round projections, and part of that calculus for the mock people doing those mocks is they're probably hearing more and more that Jordan's likely to test the waters and make himself available. I think that's part of why you're seeing that, and it's what I think will happen. But again, let's wait and see and let Jordan make his own call on that we all get to hear and see in real time. But right now, when we start talking about NBA drafts, the last time Arkansas had as many as 3 players drafted, we got to go back, and we were looking at 3 guys who have now announced they're in from this team: Black, Smith, and Council. And Devo Davis would be 4. But you have to go back to 1992. Todd Day, Lee Mayberry, Big O were all first-round picks. A lot of people forget that Isaiah Butch Morris, who had played junior college basketball in Texas, was part of that team and had used up his college eligibility, and he was drafted in the second round by the Detroit Pistons. So Arkansas actually had 4 players drafted in that 92 draft. We know Miller, Day, and Mayberry had careers in the NBA. Of course, Butch Morris is still in Northwest Arkansas. He's in the Fayetteville area still, a great hog. But this is a draft that we could see as many as 3, possibly 4, especially when if Walsh drops his name in there. And so we could see history somewhat repeat itself. I don't know how many they'll get in the first round. I think for sure 2. And maybe they can sneak another guy in, but it doesn't matter. That speaks a lot to the health of your program when you're putting guys in the NBA draft like that. And you always want to see the results on the floor match these kind of things. And, back-to-back Elite Eights, I know people would like to have seen a better finish this season, but getting back to the Sweet 16 with all that team went through with injuries and some of the other stuff, I think was a big deal because it keeps the needle moving in a positive way for a program that got again to that third weekend of the NCAA tournament. And so now when you start looking at guys going into the draft and having high projections, that's positive. That kind of keeps that momentum going. And then you see Arkansas bringing quality out of the portal. I mean, we were talking about it. What we know so far, other than Mikal Mitchell going into the portal and Kamani Johnson out of that front line, only 2 frontline guys out, most of the guys that you're really trying to replace with production are the guys that were your backcourt guys. And I think Battle at number 20 in those rankings I mentioned, Mark at number 5, you're starting to see quality there. And if you look back at the success of Eric Musselman in the portal, when you go all the way back to Jimmy Witt in year 1, guys like J.D. Notae, Jalen Tate, Justin Smith, Stanley Moody, Odise Toney, Trey Wade, Ricky Council this past season, Trevin Brazile, who is a star. This is a 5-star. You just want to, let's just call him a 5-star recruit in this class because retention, we know how it is. It's not just about guys jumping in that draft. A lot of guys who have great success where they're at are jumping in the portal. They're looking for either better NIL deals or something else when they've achieved and done well where they were at. And so you've won a huge recruiting, you 5-star with Trevor Brazile, and now you're putting backcourt pieces around it to replace guys that are moving on and going into the draft. Be very interested to see what Arkansas does in the 3-4 combo spot in the portal should Jordan Walsh declare for the draft. Even if he leaves the door cracked, again, I said my thought is just like with Devo, you recruit as though for that position as though the guy's not going to return, and you deal with it later if you can get him back. So it'll be interesting to see what develops there. As well as, again, I'm going to go back to Frontline. Arkansas is known to have been reaching out to multiple big man prospects. The number one, portal guy in the country is a 7-footer out of Michigan, was second-team All-American as a freshman, twice All Big Ten. That's Hunter Dickinson. Everybody knows who that is. Arkansas's been involved with him. Arkansas is still working that angle. That's one in there that they've been talking to. And so we'll see where things like that, how those things shape up. There are other players, stuff that I'm kind of zipped about right now, but we'll see when and how we get information out and when that'll be okay. We certainly don't want to jump ahead and get over our skis on some of this stuff. But it's always fascinating with Eric Musselman and the transfer portal and his staff. I think they're the leaders in college basketball in terms of not only volume of guys they reach out to, but their strategy on who they get and why they went after them and how it all shakes out. And the proof's in the pudding. Again, back-to-back Elite Eights, a Sweet 16 last year. And this is coming from a program that was really had been in the dark ages for a while. When you start talking about NCAA tournament success, you have to go back to the previous century. I know that sounds a little dramatic, but it's certainly true. And I think Arkansas, again, what it's doing in this portal this time, and when we start looking at guys moving on to the next level, I think it's win-win because I think it's a good look for your program to be helping guys get to the next level. I think a guy like Anthony Black, when I watched him, his maturation for his age, not just as a player, but just how he handles himself, how he was on air today, and I know his family how much they love this program and appreciate the Razorback program and their time here. And this is not a one and done. When you really think about the relationship and being a Razorback for life, I think these good folks are going to be tethered and tied to this program as Razorbacks. And I think it's another great ambassador going to the next level. He even talked about the fact that he compares himself to Josh Giddey, the big Australian young 6'8" kind of combo, but really a point guard for the Oklahoma City Thunder. And AB referenced there's Razorbacks in Oklahoma City. We know it's not far from the state boundary there and getting to Northwest Arkansas. And so that's one of the NBA organizations that has a pick in the range in the lottery where AB could be picked up. The only reason I bring it up is there's so many good Razorbacks right now, good pro hogs, and when you look at what Oklahoma City's done lately, how exciting would it be just to even think about that? Another team that's projected for AB might be the Wizards, where Dan Gafford plays. What has Dan Gafford been missing? I watch these games and watch these teams. A true point guard that's a facilitator first, who's going to set him up, and I think that'll help his game get better. And I think AB could help an organization like that 2 year, last season made it to a playing game, or maybe it was the year before that. This season wasn't too far off. And so, one or two more critical pieces, especially a guy like AB, and that organization might take the next step and be playoff worthy. And so we keep eye on all of these things, but the Pro Hogs are growing, and they're going to grow some more with guys like Anthony Black, Nick Smith Jr. By the way, those guys are program greats. I'm going to refer to them. Anybody that watches how I tweet, I refer to certain guys as hog greats. And I have my own criteria for some of that. I think all pro hogs are doing something great. But some guys and their contributions and what they mean to the program historically, what you saw on the court, and things they did to impact the program. It could be multiple things. It doesn't all look the same. But some fans, especially older fans, have a hard time referring to former Hogs as great players who aren't in the program for very long. But you have to look at it differently. You have to define things differently, in my opinion, in this era where you might only get a guy for a year. Moses Moody is a great of the Razorback basketball program. Bobby Portis stuck around for 2 years, but I consider him a great. So some of these guys aren't going to break a bunch of records because they're not going to stick around long enough. But I think they've earned their due as some of the greats of the program. And Arkansas had several this year in a season that finished in a Sweet 16 after top 10 rankings coming in. But I think, again, you look at how Arkansas is reloading in the portal right now, plus what's going on with guys moving on to the next level. Everything looks really good for Razorbacks basketball moving forward, and we're going to continue to come back and talk through this stuff. We didn't really get into how these players precisely fit in. I mentioned Battle as a volume shooter. Mark, I think, is an elite defender on the perimeter. I think Minifield, his quickness and length at 6'1", gives Arkansas some advantages it didn't have last year with a bigger backcourt that, sort of compromised with quickness in a lot of ways. But I also think they've gotten better defensively with guys like Mark and potentially Minifield and even Blocker, whereas I think Arkansas took a little bit of a step back in perimeter defense last year relative to the previous 2 years. And when you looked at the analytics, Arkansas was not quite as good defensively as those two teams that did go to the Elite Eight. So I think they're addressing many things so far out of this portal. 6'1", 6'5", and 6'5". You still have size. I think you've added more quickness. You've certainly added more shooting with Battle. I think that was a role that Nick Smith Jr. would have settled better as had he been able to stay healthy. He missed 2 months in the middle of the season, missed most of the games. And I don't think he ever quite got his timing where he wanted it to be as efficient as he wanted to be. And I think a guy like Battle, being a grad, when you look back over his career, he hasn't played a ton of games for a guy that's technically a grad. And there may be a way for him to get more than one season of eligibility because of that injury 2 years ago. That's probably something that's on the table for him. We'll see if he wants to be a one and done. That's one thing about Eric Musselman. Most of his portal guys, when he brings them in that are grads and have 1 year, they haven't really come back. They're looking to go to the pro level as well, and that's part of the enticing part of the sell of getting these guys in is that you may only get them for that 1 year. What do you do with them during that time? Musselman's had outstanding results. Prove it. He can win at a high level without having to have guys stick around 2 or 3 years out of the portal. He's had some of that, and that's big time, and there'll be more of it. But it hasn't had to be you had to grow everybody every year another year. They've done well with guys that stuck and guys that were moving through. And so again, I think this is just another example of that. And I really like these backcourt pieces. I can't stress that enough. If you run Battle off the 3 line, he's going to get you downhill. He's going to get downhill. He's got good craft in his dribble drive game. He'll go all the way to the rim and dunk it. He's good in 2-man game. He's good as a spot up. I think Mark is a guy that's offense is coming along. He proved it in the NCAA tournament, 26 points and 9 rebounds in a comeback win over Auburn for Houston. Then he had 14 points and 5 rebounds in the loss to Miami. So here's a guy that was becoming more and more productive, averaging 10 points on the season, but more and more comfortable, more and more productive offensively. So I think he's going to give Arkansas some stuff there. To me, it's like adding Adise Toney defensively and/or Devo Davis. However you want to, he's a little bigger, more like Adise Toney. And certainly the experience matches up a lot with Devo Davis when you look at the NCAA tournament success. To clarify my comment, that faded. Yeah, I think Jordan Walsh, he's brought it up about Jordan Walsh. What I said was, I believe he's going to be testing the NBA draft waters. So he hasn't put an announcement out yet, but that's my thought on it. I think that's where it's probably headed. I could be wrong about that. I don't think I am. I don't think I will be, but I could be. And then we talk about what actually happens when it happens. If an announcement's come out, what I've been on here, somebody tell me, but I don't think it has. And then, we've got, when we're starting to talk about guys, backcourt guys, if these guys are truly coming back, Joseph Pinion and Darian Ford, you had 2 top 100 4-star guys from 2 recruiting classes ago who've had a year in the system. And when those guys got their opportunities, even though they were limited, Joseph Pinion was some significant, we can call him some savior moments in league play against Missouri at home and Ole Miss at home. Arkansas had to turn those games around. He was a huge part of that, scored double figures in both. Darian Ford, though, in his opportunities, I thought both of those guys showed value and maximized their opportunities. And if any players can grow from the experiences and grow with the program in the system and they stay, I think those 2 guys have the chops. We'll see what happens. We'll see what choices are made as we move forward. It sounds like they want to come back because of what they put on social media. But we need to mention those guys with backcourt pieces because you've gotten, again, I talk about program continuity. I've been tweeting about it. Arkansas didn't really have much last year outside of Devo and Kamani. There were too many new pieces. Even the veteran guys were still learning the system and learning their way, and then guys have to mesh. And then you had injuries. You had the toughest schedule you'd ever had. And I thought it was sort of a snowball as to why we saw an up and down year, even though Arkansas finished it really well relative to all those things that happened. But guys like Joseph Penny and Darren Ford can help that. I think they can help out there. This is obviously we love doing these. I haven't been on with you for a minute. Somehow I got this jacked up where I'm holding it by hand, so that's probably moving all over the place and shaky. My tripod's lonely over here. We're getting up close to 25 minutes. I was going to have Swish Musselman on as my first guest ever today. Time may not allow for that. If not, we're going to reschedule Swish because I know he's got a lot to input for this, and we're going to look to expand and have guests on. But anyway, again, this was a big day in terms of bang announcements. I mean, within the 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock in that window, Central Time, you first had Battle coming off the board to Arkansas, and just minutes later was Anthony Black announcing that he's going into the NBA draft. And again, I think the optics are good here. The optics are good. You don't see Arkansas trying to load up on commitments when they're still technically what we see on the outside, a roster filled up, and you don't see Arkansas pushing guys out. I think they're really weighing what works best for the next roster and how Arkansas can continue to win. And the obvious goal is to get to a Final Four, to move back up that part of the ladder where the program hasn't been since Nolan Richardson. And so you've got to recruit at a high level. You've got a lot of competition to do it. And I think these portal moves so far have made sense. I think the way they're doing it makes sense. And I think, again, we could see, I think we could see a few more commitments, as many as double what we see now in 3 out of the portal, and maybe a little less than that, but it could go that much. And then we know we've got the 2 high school signees. So there's still work being done and work to be done and commitments to be had. Again, my apologies to Swish Musselman. We're going to sign off. We'll try Swish next time, see if we can get him on. But it's good to be with everybody again. It's been a minute since the end of the NCAA tournament. Until next time, good to be with you one more time.